Shared Ocean podcast brings you stories of lived experience from across the world as part of Ireland's response to the environmental and economic challenges facing many small island developing states. These proud island nations are on the front line in tackling climate change issues and are supported by Ireland in this critical battle by the Our Shared Ocean programme, a funding initiative by the Government of Ireland delivered by Irish Aid and the Marine Institute.
Hi folks, good morning and welcome to a new episode of the Our Shared Ocean podcast. My name is David O'Sullivan, Programme Manager for the Our Shared Ocean Programme, which is an initiative from the Irish Aid and the Marine Institute of Ireland to build research partnerships with small island developing states around the world. These island nations share common environmental and marine challenges and are often on the forefront of climate change. Our Shared Ocean funds marine research projects in these island nations, and here today from Guam to tell us about his direct funded project is Peter Houk from the University of Guam Marine Laboratory. Morning, Peter. How's it going?
Good morning, David. Thanks for having me. It's going well. Thank you.
I'm delighted to have you here. We've had a couple of issues over the last couple of days and weeks getting yourself on the call, so we're delighted you could be here. I'm particularly interested to hear about this project that you're running and to hear a little bit more about Guam, which is an island that many of us maybe have heard of but know very little about. We could maybe start there, if that's okay with you, and tell us maybe a little bit about the island or how you ended up there.
Yeah, sure. Like a few other people, when you're growing up and you're in love with nature, you have a difficult decision between mountains and oceans. And for me, it was oceans. And I did a study abroad program that took me over to the Republic of Palau for a semester. And I just kind of never went home over the years. And I'm joking. I did go back home to visit my mom, of course. But I've been popping around back and forth between Micronesia quite a bit over the last 20 years. And found myself now teaching at the University of Guam Marine Laboratory, where I absolutely love my research teaching position.
Good for you. Tell us about where Guam fits in then. Guam is an island in the Western Pacific, am I right in saying that, in Micronesia?
Yeah, so if we're looking at a map and let's say we're familiar with Japan and we're familiar with Hawaii and we're familiar with Indonesia, you would kind of triangulate those things. And
I'm going to quickly jump to a map here that you provided for us.
Yeah, cool. So in that map, you can see Japan on top of us, Indonesia and Papua New Guinea below us, and the Philippines over to the west. And so Guam is right there in the center of that box. And Guam is uniquely situated amongst so many diverse Pacific islands that it's become a hub for in terms of its education, in terms of people moving around and working, and then moving back to their islands. So there's a lot going on with Guam in this region, and I love the energy.
I can see your map, and very interestingly, just from an Irish viewpoint, I'm going to have to mention this. I can see Saipan on the map, and it's just up the road from Guam a little bit. Is that correct?
Yep. Yeah. So we can see Guam down on the bottom, and then we see Rota, Tinian, and Saipan. And I kind of put some stars where we have our long-term project that we'll get into a little bit later, just to give you an idea of the spread. The scale, though, if you want to appreciate that, you could pretty much overlay a map of, say, the United States and put New York to California, and you would be about between the island of Koshrai in the east and Yap on the west, just to give you an idea of how broad it is. And while there's there's a few populated islands, there are a lot of outer atolls, over 30, that have small island societies living on them. And so it's a very difficult task here that we're facing, trying to support them in their endeavor against climate change, which is growing stronger, as you know.
So these are thousands of islands. I mean, there's a couple of larger islands, obviously, where maybe some of the populations are. Guam is one self-sufficient island, we would say, but there's thousands of, as you said, these tiny, small islands and atolls, some of which have populations and some of which presumably don't, but they're spread across nearly 3,000 miles of ocean.
It's really amazing, David. And, just recently, we've been in this data collection phase. We had this cool opportunity to collaborate with the National Geographic Pristine Seas Society, a really exciting boat. And that boat started off in the Republic of the Marshall Islands and went all the way over to Yap and visited something like 20 to 30 islands. And, you know, this is it. And this is the tongue where climate change is coming and going. He heats up in the Eastern Pacific, and that hot water comes over to the Western Pacific. And it spins off a little to the north and the south. But this area right here gets hit every single time there's a climate change event. Whereas, say, the Great Barrier Reef and other places might get it one year, not quite the next El Nino, and so on and so on. These guys are unfortunately at the forefront of it. And that's what we really saw on that recent expedition we were on. And, you know, one of the real difficult things is getting our data in the hands of the right people quickly. And that's where our project comes in.
But take me back a couple of steps there. You say climate change happens and these events hit there. But what happens? What hits there every year? Exactly. Like, are we talking water temperature increase, storm surges, pH?
Sure. And what we're mainly talking about here is the increased temperatures. So the Eastern Pacific heats up. As you know, when the trade winds die off of the continents of the Americas, the winds stop blowing. And when the winds stop blowing, the water heats up. And as that water heats up, eventually the ocean needs to regulate itself. You can think about one of those, what do you call it, teeter-totters when you're a kid. You know, you jump on it, you know. So when one side gets too hot and the ocean stops moving, the sea surface height changes, and everything's basically out of equilibrium. So eventually there's absolutely no choice. All that warm water has to come across the Pacific. It's just a matter of when it's going to come and just exactly if it's going to be at 5 degrees north, 7 degrees north, 8 degrees north. You know, it's these minute differences that really happen. And we're in an El Nino right now.
So, okay, so the temperature, the warm water comes back across the Pacific slowly. The degree of latitude or longitude might change incrementally depending on maybe the strength of El Nino. So you're saying you're in El Nino now. So it's springtime here in Ireland, give or take, which I guess makes it coming into winter for you guys.
Yep, we are towards the end of our winter. And so what we've experienced so far is all that warm water was piling up last year, and it slowly started to migrate. And so we see islands like Samoa's, Tonga, getting the brunt of the really warm sea surface temperatures, and the corals are starting to bleach in some of those places. And as we migrate into our spring and summer, that's going to come over our way too.
And so it's corals then that are the biggest species that we're actually talking about here that are affected by this increase in water temperature. Is that right?
Yeah, you know, that's a good point that we mentioned. It's not just corals, but corals are definitely the most visual thing. I have some pictures of a before and after scene that I think are worth showing. It's pretty cool. I think it's, let's see, 2, 3, 4. Slide number 7 and number 8, if you just go between those two slides.
We'll jump to slide 7 and 8, but I can see you've got some great slides there at the back. We'll come back to it for maybe the full story, but happy to. So I'm on slide 7 now. Hopefully people listening will get a chance to catch the recording of this. It will be on live. It will be on our YouTube channel after this, and there's some very interesting images I'm looking at here, and Peter's going to talk to them now. Cool.
So this is a patch reef over in the north of Houk. Houk is one of the SIDS in the Federated States of Micronesia. And here you can basically see a blooming garden. You know, these are called acropora corals, known for forming plates and tables and creating, look at all those little microhabitats that you can see underneath each of those corals. And that's really good for fish, urchins, and so many things that people rely on, and beauty and tourism income. Now, just 1 year later, we revisited, or 2 years later, and flipped the slide.
So, okay, just for my own understanding, slide 7, what we're looking at here, that's a healthy coral reef ecosystem.
Yeah, it's a very healthy coral reef ecosystem that we're looking at here, with these brown colors representing life, pinks and browns, and a little bit whites. And yeah, and now we have what looks like, to me at least, someone set a match and lit a fire and burned all of the coral. So what we're seeing here is, you can see the structure is still there for now. But what's happened is the coral has lost all of its color. And after it's, and these are the photosynthetic algae that live inside of the skin of the color. And after they lose that's like 60–70% of their energy. So they just can't hang on. So eventually they just die. And so what we're looking at here, David, is basically a completely dead reef. There's some algae growing on it. And eventually that reef is going to, I don't want to use the word crumble, but the habitat structure can't be intact unless those corals are alive. And some of them can recover with new corals growing on them, but some of them, or many of them, won't recover and will have to basically start over after the reef crumbles a little bit.
So once the algae leave, it's doubtful that they can come back to the same structure, but new corals could potentially grow on that structure. Is that
exactly? Yep. Yep.
And it's the rising temperature that's making these algae flee the scene, essentially, or the coral ejects them.
Exactly. And what's so interesting, well, there's so many fascinating things about this, but one of the things that's so interesting is that when this occurs, the amount of fish living on the reef almost doubles in biomass. And it took me a while to really appreciate why that was. And because the fish can graze on the living coral a little bit, but they don't really get a lot of food, and it's a lot of work to graze on the calcium skeleton. But when the fish can eat all of this algae that's growing on the dead coral skeleton, their population really goes crazy. So we kind of equate this to the COVID vaccine, if you will. So this response of the fish assemblage, doubling in biomass after the corals die and the algae grow, it's kind of like the antibodies in our body going crazy when we get COVID and we've already had the vaccine. So it's kind of like this natural response, I guess, if you will. And so this is a really cool aspect of it. And one of the issues here is we have to manage the fish better, especially during these events, because most people, when they see more fish, harvest more fish. It's pretty common response. And most people haven't dealt with climate change to really understand all the things that are going on there. So these drastic scenes are unfolding all across our region here in Micronesia, but truly all across the Pacific.
So the water temperature rises slightly, the algae are ejected, and the coral reef begins to die, or the initial process of. But that actually increases the fish assemblage and the biodiversity, presumably in the biomass of fish in the region, which to a casual observer might make it look like there's a healthy system going on here, but in reality it's not. So if you go in and tackle or over harvest that fish population, which is a false recording, would say, then that's just going to have even more deleterious effects on the entire ecosystem and the fish populations in the long term.
Yeah. Can you imagine harvesting your antibodies that are fighting the COVID vaccine?
Yeah, I can see. I'm just trying to provide the context there, but yeah, so that's a difficult situation. And if these corals then are reflected all across the Western Pacific, as you're saying, these areas of 3,000 and out as far as the likes of Samoa and Tonga, and this is the coral triangle, essentially. Is this what this area is known as?
The area that I've been doing a lot of work in is called Micronesia. So it's a little bit north and to the east of the Coral Triangle. Coral Triangle exists kind of south of Micronesia. So it's a series of islands, as we saw in that map.
Okay, that's interesting. So that provides the context of what's happening in the waters around the Western Pacific at the moment. And they brought on by events by climate change, which are rising temperatures. Is there an issue with ocean acidification, storm surges? Are you dealing with kind of multiple threat levels, or is this the most prominent? Temperature is the most prominent, I guess.
Yeah. So without a doubt, these major events that come with, we'll call these marine heat waves. So these major events associated with marine heat waves are definitely the strongest ones. The other things that are happening are predator starfish outbreaks. These are called Crown of Thorns Starfish. I
have a son at home that listens to octonauts, and the Crown of Thorns Starfish is the most pressing issue in his life at the moment, and I guess it's pretty serious out there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And really it's all hands on deck when these events unfold. And what's happening with climate change is that a forest fire a long time ago wasn't the worst thing in the world. It allowed restructuring of the forest. Perhaps one might argue is natural at some level if it occurred naturally or something like that. But when we start piling on disturbance after disturbance, it doesn't do good for the system. If we don't take care of our bodies, and maybe we smoke too many cigarettes or something like that, and we're not healthy. And then we get the flu, and then on top of the flu, we get COVID, and then on top, eventually we're going to perish from something like that. And so really what's happening here with climate change is that it's invoking a lot of disturbances, marine heat waves being the biggest one, but these return frequencies are really high when you add them all up together. And that's another problem.
Okay, so you're seeing this, and tell us where this all fits in with the work programs we say at the University of Guam, the Marine Laboratory where you are currently working. What is the type of approaches you're taking to this?
Could you repeat that?
I suppose if these are the main threats to the marine environment, how does that fit into the work program, we'll say, of the University of Guam, the Marine Laboratory where you're situated, where you're working? What kind of programs and challenge or work programs are involved in? What kind of partners you're bringing in? I guess that you can't work in isolation on this, given the complexity and the size of the region.
Yeah, I was very fortunate a long time ago to, I finished my doctoral studies and did a postdoc working with the whole region, started a nonprofit organization to establish standardized coral reef monitoring. And so you say, what can we do about this? So I'm showing you a very drastic picture of a reef that completely died. But would you believe that if I showed you reefs around that entire island of Houk, some of them were impacted very little or almost not at all? And so one of the key things we need to do are find, we call them the unicorns, I guess, if you will. Find the people that didn't get, I'll keep the COVID analogy going, maybe it's useful. Find those people that didn't get sick or got mildly sick from COVID. What is it about them? Was there some attribute about them? So one of the things we're doing is collecting and sharing data very, very quickly as possible, because time is of the essence. We don't have time to process the data for years and wait to tell our story. And so that's kind of where our project is really coming from, is that we've been monitoring these reefs and we're looking for these unicorn reefs. And when we find them, we set up a protection, or if you will, I'll call it marine protected areas. Let's see, slide. We have a slide on that. Number 13 has an example of that.
13, thank you. We probably haven't approached your story in a linear fashion here, but I still think it's relevant. Slide 13 is shown there at the moment, if you can see that.
Yeah, and so on the right-hand side here is that there's a different story on the left-hand side, but on the right-hand side here, you can see these boxes are now set up in a network. So before you might have a protected area set up and then not another one close by, but the concept here is imagine Wi-Fi routers around your house. You want marine protected areas all within a range where they can speak to each other so that the Wi-Fi signal is good around the entire island. That's another analogy I'm using, but what that's allowing is the larvae from the corals and the fish from one MPA to make it all the way to the other MPA. So we'll call this a connected MPA network. And that's really important, and that's one of the major advances. So not only do we have to connect our marine protected areas, we have to know that they're working. And again, time is of the essence. We have to know that they're being enforced. And you can see the story on the left where we used our data to basically mitigate some illegal harvesting that was occurring on behalf of the children of one of the islands in Ponape. That's an interesting story. The children sued the government for the right for their future to have healthy ecosystems. And they kicked out the company that was illegally harvesting sea cucumbers in this case. And one of the reasons they found out about this is because we turn around our data as quickly as possible. Imagine if we have to wait 2 years to tell the story, the harvesting would be completed already.
Yeah, you do need to be able to make these decisions in real time, and well done to those young people. I think often maligned, but often stand up to these issues where adults sometimes don't. So I think that's fantastic. Just taking 2 steps further back, the interconnectivity of the MPAs is very important. I mean, there's work and research, and is it better to have one kind of large one or lots of single smaller ones? How far away are they? Are they connected for biological dispersal? So it's The oceans and tides that are moving these days, these larvae between the marine reserves, we hope, or do they have movement themselves?
Yeah,
I
there's a
assume
couple ways to
there's
figure that
zooplankton
out.
somewhere.
Definitely. We're looking at the, in a perfect world, you'd have some ocean current dynamics to understand that. In a less perfect world, you can look at the population structure from DNA tests and see just how overlapping the populations are between these MPAs. So if they're situated close enough. And in a less perfect world, if you don't have all of that, you use your knowledge about fish and corals and how far larvae can travel in an average situation.
Yeah, and how long they exist in the larval form. Yeah, that's very interesting. Do you have hydrodynamic modeling or hydrodynamic data down there that has helped your models?
Yeah, and so that's just it. So when we talk about some sophisticated things like a hydrodynamic model, very desirable. And what we're trying to do is learn from a few islands where we can build, say, a model and try and apply that to other areas. So currently only in Yap and Palau, we have hydrodynamic models. Oh, and Marshall Islands, I take that back. So we have 3 places where we have them, and we're learning quite a great deal about it. And using those models, we were actually able to predict. Remember, I was talking about those unicorn reefs, or those reefs that when this marine heat wave came, that didn't get impacted nearly as much as some of the other ones. And it's through those hydrodynamic models that we were able to extract kind of like a pattern, if you will. And so now with this El Nino that's coming on now, we think we know where to look to save, because we don't have all the money in the world it's very expensive to get out to these reefs during these marine heat waves. And we have to use as much information as we have to get out there, learn and manage, and basically complete that circle. If you go up 2 slides to number 11, it really shows our, that's really what it's all about here. This is kind of the process, and it's all about how quickly we can get that turnaround. So you can see the marine laboratory I work for there, and then you can see all the other entities. There's the Houk, Ponte Conservation Society, Palau International Reef, and we all collaborate together, and we have training, so everyone's using the same protocols, and we're getting very good, high quality data. And then we have automated programs. And now what we're working on is this automated database where we can store and get information. So these bottom 2 squares, if you will, that's where we're really getting towards with this present project, because our management is happening too slow for climate change right now. It was fine when it was just dealing with fishing pressure or land-based pollution. We were able to turn this wheel or move around this circle. No, I wouldn't say quickly enough, but efficiently. But when you put climate change in the mix, it's really, really, really hard to do that.
I can imagine. And you're telling the story very well. For those of you listening, you might just describe that process I'm looking at in just 1 or 2 steps, if you would, just to kind of go through that slide. So for someone who might be listening as opposed to looking at that slide.
Sure. So for this slide, we want to start in the top left corner with the, say, University of Guam Marine Laboratory. These represent partner organizations. Some are governmental, some are non-governmental, some are academic. Here is your basically, this is your research and management arms coming together, and your trained staff. And so with all of these people, you have the, say, scientific expertise. So from UOG, we will train. So here you have some photos in the middle, and you can see some individuals taking a photo of the reef, conducting a survey of the corals or invertebrates, or talking to each other on the boat on how they're going to go down exactly and collect information. So, you don't just go down and write down your thoughts. You actually have to have a really standardized approach. By standardized, you have exactly, say, 50-meter lines, and every 1 meter there's a perfect mark. And you take a photo at every single meter. So it's a very structured process to get really good quality standard data. And one of the problems, if we continue on to the right, is you end up with a lot of imagery. These days, cameras are relatively cheap. Even underwater cameras, as you can see from some of the photos we've been sharing, they're amazing. We can capture such gorgeous scenes very quickly. So this software that you're seeing on the right here allows you to basically describe the percent cover of coral, algae, and things like that very quickly. So it's using some artificial intelligence. So as you click the buttons, the program gets a little bit smarter and smarter and smarter. So it slowly learns the names of the corals, and that has saved a lot of time. So that represents what I'll call raw data. Now, raw data has to go somewhere. So now we move down on the diagram here. And what we're building right now is an online storage place, because in the past, these raw data go into a hard drive. They get lost on individual people's hard drives. You know how it is when you switch over to a new computer. So now we have this online home where all our data is going to be stored. And so this is really something we're super excited about. And we're moving into a new iteration with our present projects. And one of the things that website is going to do, and we hope to share more about it later when we develop it, but we're going to end up with very quick turnaround of information. That's going to move over to the arrow to the left. So these are state of the reef presentations. So this is where you might be the chief of the village, or you might be the president of the FSM. And we have these basic pieces of information. Some are publications, and then the publications drive nice consumable outreach. And then there's a management. And so on the left of that, you see this is a size class regulation that was passed in Pohnpei a few years back, that we figured out what sizes are the best to take these fish. And then we go through the cycle again. We don't stop there, because just because you set up management, you might not get it right, or it might need to be adapted. So that's the circle, I guess, if you will. And I'd like to just remind people that, you know, it's not a static thing. In a perfect world, we can keep going around that for each of our islands that we work with.
So that's excellent overview, actually, what's happening here. I think you mentioned FSM in the middle of that, which, just for our listeners, is I think the Federated States of Micronesia, right, saying that? Yeah. Just for clarity. So, which essentially brings us from the big picture of Guam, the marine environment that we've discussed there, through the work of the University of Guam and the Marine Laboratory. And I just got a few notes here. The faculties, the primary mission of the Marine Lab's faculty is basic and applied research in the biology of tropical marine organisms, with emphasis on the conservation and development of marine resources of the nearshore waters of Guam and Micronesia, which is essentially the story you're just after telling us. And last year, Our Shared Ocean had a series of calls open where we invited applications for direct funding projects, which is the first time we had followed this initiative where we were funding directly into in these international islands. And yourself, Peter, applied on behalf of the University of Guam and on behalf of a number of project partners in the region. And I think, and so the project title itself was Automated Science to Management Frameworks to Improve Coral Reef Resilience and Fisheries in Micronesia SIDS, which is essentially the story just after telling us there, how to go about and standardize the collection of this data, which will look at the robustness of coral reefs in response to climate change and increased temperatures, and come up with management strategies to improve coral reef resilience and fisheries in Micronesia. So that's the project which you've described. Is there anything you'd like to tell us about the project? Any other slides you'd like us to visit?
Yeah, you know, a couple things just to add. Just I'll take a step back for a moment. The University of Guam Marine Laboratory is really, like I say, situated in a unique location. So yeah, we're not necessarily trying to come in and do the science for them or be the technical arm. Actually, what we really want to do is get them to come over to the University of Guam, right? The goal here is to replace ourselves, right, and create island leaders. And so I'll give you an example. I actually did my master's degree at the University of Guam a long, long time ago. And then I went on somewhere else to do a PhD and stuff like that. But among my colleagues at the University of Guam Marine Lab were basically the director of the Palau International Coral Reef Center. So just to give you how important the Marine Lab has been, the current director of the Nature
Geraldine Ringel. Go on.
Oh, no, sorry. The current director of the Nature Conservancy Micronesia program, also a University of Guam Marine Laboratory graduate. as well as the lead biologist for many of these different islands, all University of Guam Marine Laboratory graduates. So that's, yes, we're the technical arm. And I guess I just wanted to add that really we put a strong emphasis on training too through our projects, and get students from each of these different islands to be contributing so that we enhance the capacity.
Well, that's how good capacity development really works, is to train as opposed to tell, to teach, and inform, and to bring people along in the journey. And it's all about, and at that level, it's all about really stakeholder consultation management and making sure everyone's brought along that journey with you.
Yeah, it really has. And, you know, if you go to slide 12, I think it's one of the last ones, but this one's really cool because this one really gives you an idea of where we've been. And I want to highlight this because this is really impressive when you think about the number of individual surveys that has been conducted since the year 2000. So what happened in the year 2000? All the programs were kind of on their own. And all of a sudden, the Micronesia region, the political leaders of Micronesia decided, hey, we're going to initiate a conservation movement that's called the Micronesia Challenge. So David, I'm going to challenge you to effectively conserve 30% of your marine resources, and so on. So this was this friendly challenge. And of course, there's funding involved with a friendly challenge, funding and fundraising and things like that. And from that, one of the things that came out was we said, look, why are we all going about doing this science on our own? Let's get together. And that's exactly what happened. So the different color of the dots here represent different islands in Micronesia. So you can see all the pink and purple here. It's kind of started in one area in Guam and the Marianas. And you can see it expanding by the different colors that you see along that chart over the years. And what's exciting now is that we just recently expanded to Samoa. And so people are starting to get the idea that this is a nice collaboration because by working together, we can all contribute just a little bit of money, and we can build something like what we're doing now, which is an online data portal that's going to benefit everyone similarly, but no one by themselves could ever have the funding to build this online data portal. It would be impossible, you know, but when you put 12, 15, in our case, we have 32 different islands and atolls now joined together, all of a sudden the funding is there. So I guess you could call this crowdsourced collaboration funding, if you will, in a sense. And that's really one of the things I wanted to highlight here about the Micronesia region that's, I find, very unique across the entire Pacific.
So this data portal, and do you think this would be the main output from the project, the creation of this portal where data can be stored effectively?
Definitely. So that's one of our main outputs. We want to have some visualizations of the data trends. And then we have a technical output too. I mentioned, if you remember, I mentioned the Micronesia Challenge, the friendly challenge that the political leaders posed to each other. So the technical part is we're actually going to use the data and write a more scientific analysis and evaluate where everyone is. So we have the less technical, well, it's all technical, but we have the immediate automated information online. And then we have this kind of big conservation scientific assessment outcome. And we hope to understand who's doing very well in the Micronesia Challenge, what is it that's holding them back, and what is it that's pushing them forward. Very specifically, what is it? Is it fisheries regulations? Is it land-based sources of pollution? We want to get down to the local stressor and the watershed level as best that we can so that we can inform management. And so that's what we think we can do by making our data portal, we'll call the resolution, scale to an individual site instead of a whole island. So you can imagine a site, there's a watershed, and there's a village that fishes on this reef, and we'll have a long-term monitoring site there. And we want this data portal to help tell the story of that site while also telling a story of the entire region. So it's a very difficult thing to scale both together, but we believe that we can do it with our project partners, and we are ready to try.
So that's where this funding specifically from Our Shared Ocean comes in then, is to coordinate this group of volunteers and island stakeholders, different groups of islanders, to map and monitor and bring the data together within this portal.
Exactly. So we don't have the bandwidth to process all of the information that's out there. But with this project, we are going to be able to synthesize hopefully all of the data that you can see on the screen right here, or as much as possible, and bring it all together and have nice immediate user-based access, data security backed up, and information sharing. Click on your site and understand, is your marine protected area currently working or is it not? Imagine that at your fingertips. You could do a survey today and tomorrow you'll know the answer whether or not it's working or whether it's not, and what's going on with it. And that's the world we want to get closer to. I don't want to say we're going to be perfectly there, but that's where we're heading.
Management in real time, being able to respond to real time changes in temperature, for example, on the ground level, looking at coral reef bleaching events and knowing, in a couple of days later what actually could be done about it or what mitigation strategies could be possible.
Yeah, you summed it up very well there. That's truly what it's all about. And yes, we have funding streams, but we don't have funding streams to bring this all together. And so without this project that we have that you guys launched for the SIDS region, this would remain a dream until longer. We've been looking for 2 or more years for unique sources of funding that might help us collaborate together on the analytical part, on the database building and things like that, and having data in real time. But usually the way funding works is I'm going to fix that watershed, I'm going to monitor that reef in front of it and bring that all together. That's your project. People like to see something tangible within say a specific smaller area. So we're grateful for the larger vision here across the SIDS, and we think that the project is really going to result in something that we can all be proud of.
Well, there's a very strong political ambition to work with the SIDS here from Ireland, and that's embodied in the Our Shared Ocean programme. Ireland is an island nation itself, and might have gone through, although it doesn't live in tropical waters, might have gone through various learnings and challenges, and we now have a very good understanding of our marine, a very good marine infrastructure and learnings to tell. And we started off doing the Our Shared Ocean programme whereby we encouraged joint partnerships between Irish and international partners, which worked and which does work. But in order to build true capacity in international countries and SIDS, we thought that directly funding your projects like yours, for example, you guys know what's needed more than researchers here in Ireland. You've got your fingers on the pulse, you've got the network, and you're after showing a fantastic example of a working project here and what the actual real impact of it could be. And it's not just the local impact, it's the regional impact. And obviously we can't stop rising temperatures coming across the ocean waves at us, but we can certainly try to effectively find ways to manage and monitor it. So thanks for that. I think it's a brilliant.
I would just, in closing here, I just want to say that we don't operate in a bubble. We don't operate in a box around Micronesia. We have partners and universities all around. And we do hope that this leads us into partnerships with some of the institutions in Ireland and some of the other people that you guys are also connected with. So yeah, we hope that this builds our collaborative network too, because we are open. And one of the reasons we're so successful is because we've been so open with our ideas and wanting to collaborate with individuals, whether it's students over there, whether it's seasoned professors that have very unique skill sets that can help us. The whole range of things is what we're looking for.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the mantra of Our Shared Ocean to build strategic partnerships with the small and developing states. So it starts with projects like this. You can find out more about the Our Shared Ocean programme at oursharedocean.ie, our own new website, and this story will be featured on that website, as with Peter's project. And we'll be looking forward to checking in with you, we'll say in a couple of months or when the time is right, as to maybe give us an update on how things are going. Is there anything else you'd like to close with? There's a number of slides here, Peter, you haven't got, so I don't know, you want to speak to them just very briefly? Just a couple of nice images I thought you might like to.
Yeah, just a couple of fun images in closing, just so people can get kind of the idea. Here's one of the outer atolls. So in this location here, you see the traditional canoes. So this is what you'll see when you go to islands that don't have airport runways, if you will. And that's a typical men's house right there, where boats would be stored and people would go and hang out before they go fishing. Down below is from one of our visits, just showing you how involved the kids are and open and welcoming they are. And the picture there down on the right there is just showing you a typical road with no cars, just moving around and really living off the land in subsistence from agriculture and the reef and the fisheries. And here we go again, without powered boats. Most of these islands are using these traditional canoes, such as—
That's the proa, is it? The proa?
Yeah. And
which actually featured in the flag of Guam.
Yeah, it's fascinating what these guys can do with these. They navigate by the stars in between these atolls for generations, before we had GPS units, and they drive their fish on the docks like that. And yeah, a couple of really fun guys there on the right.
The last thing I want to ask is just this image here, and for those of you listening, hopefully you get a chance to look at it earlier. I'm just interested to know what's going on this slide. I'm seeing a before and after picture here, and it looks like a lot of water runoff from an island. Do you want to?
Sure. This is actually near my house over in Guam, just to show you how quickly a situation can change. A lot of people will see that picture on the top and won't understand that land-based sources of pollution is something pretty major that they need to address and evaluate and inform the government about, and so here's just a drastic image, just one day apart after a rainstorm that had washed stuff out. So this is basically getting at the importance of understanding land-based pollution and how that sediment and nutrients drape over the reefs. And on the right-hand side, we have a photograph from the 1970s. And what you're looking at here is basically, those are reef fish, slow-growing reef fish being harvested just in really large quantities back in the 70s. And now there's a modern catch from someone with a much larger spear gun, just to give you, again, we're removing a lot of the fish on the reef over the years. So these are what we'll call modern challenges, not to mention now on top of this, we're dealing with climate change and some of the other things. So as we were talking about before, David, we've done a pretty good job at starting to address these in that wheel that we were looking at. And one of the things that's really messing us up really hard now is just in 2015 right here, look at Koshrai. That's the reef. And then you can see a couple of years later, if you go to the next slide, you can see what happens to that reef. And the real tough situation is that reef's recovering right now. But guess what? It's 2024 and we're in an El Nino and the hot water is expected to come back within 6 months. Will it hit this reef? We don't know the exact answer. But you can see the challenges that people are up against.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Peter. You've given a very good account of those challenges here today, and I thank you very much for your time. I think it's really interesting what the University of Guam is doing. You're right about the pollutants and nutrients washing offshore from islands, draping the reefs, but also going deep down into the deeper channels. And Guam is the closest landmass, I believe, to the Mariana Trench, and there's been pollutants found in sediments all the way down there as well. So not only do you have to work with the deepest waters on Earth, you've got the coral reefs also. Peter, thank you very much for your time today. As I said, it was a great account of the work, and I really look forward to hearing more about this project. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been a really fun experience.
The Our Shared Ocean podcast is a funding initiative by the Government of Ireland through Irish Aid and managed by the Marine Institute. If you enjoyed this episode, you can find more like it. Subscribe, rate and review on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. Are you a marine scientist or student based in a small island developing state? Would you like to tell us about your research? Visit www.oursharedocean.ie and we'll see you in the next episode.